Plenty of football to discuss, and we'll talk Monday Night Football next on Sports Bar. Hello and welcome into another edition of Sports Bar. I'm David Jackson. The gang is all here. We've got plenty of football to discuss today. Not only Appalachian State's win over Wyoming, college football in general, and we'll get into a little NFL football. And I want to start off by saying you guys were right, I was wrong.
Yes, we were.
It feels good. It feels conventional wisdom prevailed.
The thing about this, though, that's fortunate for me is that I had such a large lead that I can go with some road picks because I've got enough leeway there. But we'll talk NFL in a moment. But first off, Appalachian State with another win on the gridiron. That's 3 wins out of 4 in non-conference play. Overall, you guys' thoughts on the win over Wyoming Saturday?
I mean, I thought they played well. The only caveat with that is the fact that the rush defense, or the running defense, gave up 200 yards to a running back first time in like 10 or so years. So that's they got to improve on that as they go into their conference schedule. But overall, I thought it was a great win.
Yeah, it was definitely a good game. I mean, especially with the weather being as what it was, I think I'm glad that there wasn't more turnovers, there weren't more issues, especially with the ball being so wet and the visibility being, I mean, even from the stands, not very good. But I definitely think we need to work on passing a little bit. I mean, I think it was 3 of 12 on passing. So, 64 yards and an interception isn't exactly what we need to look forward to. But, I mean, it's just a spot on what overall was a fairly good game.
Well, you're not going to be looking to pass the ball that much on a day like Saturday.
That's
anyway.
true.
So I'm not, overly worried or concerned about that. We had the running game going, and this game was also somewhat of a product of, we scored a touchdown on the first play from scrimmage.
Yeah.
So, when that happens, I guess part of you kind of might, get into that mindset of, okay, we probably got this game. We could probably definitely run the ball. So you don't want to break it if it's, or you don't want to change it up if it's broken.
Yeah,
it's
but my only thing is when you've got guys like Marcus Cox down there, it's easy to fall back on the run game. It's easy to start putting a lot of your time and everything into that run game. I'm just worried we're going to get a little too comfortable, and then if something does happen, suddenly it's like we need to throw the ball, and oh gosh, now we can't.
Well, let's not forget about Old Dominion, though. I mean, they played in similar conditions the weekend before, and Lamb threw a career high in touchdowns. So, I mean, I'm not that worried about this game. I think that, they kind of showed that Marcus Cox is going to be their guy. I mean, we've all expected that, and they relied on him, and he had 2 50-plus yard runs in the game. So, I mean, when it's working, like you said, don't try to fix it.
And let's also keep in mind, too, that Appalachian ran 21 less plays than Wyoming did, and a byproduct of that hot start, like you talked about, was the fact that you had 14 points on 6 total plays. When you factor in the Cox run on the first play from scrimmage and then Latrell Gibbs pick 6 the other way, the offense was only on the field for 2 minutes of the first quarter. So you're not going to gain a whole lot of yards. You're not going to get Marcus Cox out of the gate when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. And I think part of the reason why the defense gave up as many yards as they did on the ground, first of all, they didn't get off the field on third down as well in the first half as they had in the previous games. This was one of the best third down defenses in the country. They got that rectified in the second half. But the other part of that was that they just didn't have the football. So your defense is out on the field for so long, your offense comes down and scores, or your defense in the pick 6 sense takes the ball down and scores, and then you're right back out there again. So there were adjustments that needed to be made that, quite honestly, they just couldn't get to because they didn't have the ball long enough.
That's very true.
And certainly circumstances with the weather were valid. Both teams had to go through that. I thought Appalachian did a better job adjusting to that, understanding that when you were driving toward the scoreboard, you couldn't throw. When you were driving away from the scoreboard, you had rain in your face, and there were certain things that you couldn't do there as well. So you've got I took it as you've got to win a game ugly every once in a while. And while there were some finesse aspects of that certainly were visually appealing, I think that was one of those grinded out, just got to go win, and who cares what the score is.
And you mentioned Latrell Gibbs, too. I mean, he's a guy who, much like Josh Norman and the Carolina Panthers, has just had a terrific start to this season. We talked about him last week. He's got another pick, this one a pick 6. And I think on that play, there was certainly a breakdown in communication because there was no Wyoming wide receiver around that ball.
Gibbs was wide open.
Gibbs was wide open. He hit him right in the numbers, and he did what he was supposed to do.
It was a great throw on that.
Yeah, exactly. So, possibly maybe he's a guy. He's a young guy for us right now, and certainly Ronald Blair is an NFL prospect. But possibly maybe Gibbs is a guy who in a few years could follow in what should be Ronald Blair's footsteps.
Yeah, I think he's spoiling us a little bit with a pick a game. If he finishes the game or the season with 12 picks, I mean, wow, he may not be around here too long. But yeah, he's played out of his mind. I mean, and he's tied for second in the nation right now, which is great. Great coverage for Appalachian, and it just says a lot about the defense as a whole. I think though, because I think it's our ability to get pressure up front that's getting him in position. Now, not on the pick six specifically, because like you said, he was wide open, but in general, he's been in the right spot. And I think the blitz has caused a lot of those interceptions. And it shows because this interception this past week was the first one that went for any yards. Typically, he's just like in the right spot, gets the pick, drops to the ground, and change of possession. So, but things are looking up for him.
Yeah, that says a lot about him as a player, though. I think it says a lot of him saying, I've got the ball, I was able to make the pick, but he's not going for that crazy play. He's not always going for the numbers. So I think it's good that he's willing to get the ball and then do what he needs to do with it, as opposed to what I think guys can get a little carried away with and say, I'm going to make the big game-changing play. So, but he's definitely gotten awareness.
Showcasing his football IQ.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's been in the right place, right time, because he has been in the right place at the right time. He's done that himself. I think it's interesting sometimes, too, in sports, you look at this time a year ago, and Zach Maddox was coming off of one of the more disastrous performances of his career by his own admission, and here a year later, he is the complete hero of that game. Not only the catching the lateral on the fake field goal, which was just as non-Appalachian football as you can get, all right? Fake field goal, lateral catch, and then turns around and makes a 51-yard field goal into the driving, swirling wind with rain and all that stuff. Heavy football, you name it. Quite a difference in 365 days for a guy that's going to be really relied upon to be a key part of this team going forward this year.
It's a lot of confidence with kickers, and I think he's finally showing that. I mean, the 51-yard field goal, quite frankly, I was amazed considering the conditions, and especially considering that his previous career long was somewhere in the 30-yard range.
31.
31, okay. So beating that by 20 yards, given the conditions, is very impressive. And I think just confidence went on as the game. I mean, getting a pitch and going for the first down, and then the next play we go up 21-7 is huge for your confidence. And then coming out, I mean, it plays such a huge role, and it showed on the field goal.
I've heard Maddox in several interviews since that Southern Miss game from last year say something to the effect of, it doesn't get any worse than that. So hopefully that does help his mental health, because he knows I can probably not play a worse game than I did that day. Yeah. So in some ways, there's nothing to lose in many cases. And also, it was the longest field goal, I'm pretty sure, by an Appalachian player since Sam Martin hit one. I think it was in 2011.
Yeah, he had a 53-yarder, I believe. Yeah,
exactly. So certainly a good game for Maddox.
Yeah,
I think a lot of fans too were surprised when he came out of the spring and fall as the starting place kicker again, with Michael Rubino coming in at the midpoint of last year. Coming in early out of high school, and so much competition at that position. Again, everybody had in their mind that Maddox had that episode at Southern Miss, came back after an injury to kick off some down the stretch of last year, but I think credit to him to put some of those demons behind. And as you said, kickers are that's a mental job there. So to be able to respond like that, he's the Sun Belt Special Teams Player of the Week this week, so congratulations to him for that, and that'll be a big piece going forward. I think one thing to close on the Appalachian game, or at least this past game, was John Law's play. Again, almost gets undervalued in a sense, because you've got Gibbs picking off a pass every game, you've got Marcus Cox going for 100 yards every game, and you've got Blair in the quarterback's face. But all of a sudden, here's Law, 5th in the league in tackles. He is playing phenomenal football right now, and nearly almost had his third straight pick.
Yeah, I was going to say, he was really close to getting that third interception. And I mean, I think he had a sack in a game. He kind of had all the big defensive stats. He had a tally somewhere along the line. He's just been all over the field, and I think it's, like I said, it all falls back on the overall defense. Everybody is able to, if they're just playing smart, they're in the right positions, and it's showing. I mean, 13 tackles, you don't do that by accident. Yeah,
that's the key. It certainly is team defense. Right now we're 4th in the nation in total team defense, so that's not too shabby. Even though we've played, Howard is mixed in there, we've also played Clemson, and certainly ODU. That game was a little more one-sided than I would have thought.
Yeah, exactly.
But certainly the defensive side of the ball, and Nate Woody's got those guys playing the way they should.
Yeah, well, it's nice to see with as much time I think that the defense has been getting on the field that there's not more mistakes happening. I think it says a lot that they are able to do what they're doing and do it well for a longer period of time. I mean, they were on the field for what felt like forever this past game, so it was nice to see that they weren't
38 minutes, I think it was.
Yeah.
Good to see Clemson, too. 6th in the country now. Saw Notre Dame give up about as many points as Appalachian did, so maybe it's not just us. Kind of going back off our conversation from last week. All right, your thoughts on Georgia State this time around?
I can't have any. I think App State's going to roll this week. I saw them play them last year, and I know that they have a good quarterback in Nick Arbuckle, but other than that, I don't really see the overall talent doesn't match up with what App State's going to bring to Georgia.
Now, I will say, though, that you mentioned Arbuckle. They can certainly air out the ball.
Yes.
And so you wonder, you saw Clemson pick on Williams a little bit, in our defensive backfield. Now, certainly, they're not going to face Deshaun Watson and Ray McLeod and some of those guys for Clemson. But are some Georgia State does have some playmakers. They did put up, I think, 28 on Oregon. So I see us winning this game, but it's probably going to be to our benefit to, much like this past week, run the ball, control the clock, and kind of grind the game out.
Yeah, I got to take App too, just for the reasons that you can't really, I can't pick against them this far in. I think I want the bowl eligibility and everything, so I just want the 3 games to get them now and not worry about them later.
Georgia State cannot be the conference game you drop if you're App State.
Exactly.
It just can't, and so they have to be careful not to overlook this game. But at the same time, if they just focus going into this game, barring disastrous turnover situations or things like that, they should win pretty handily.
One of the elements you were just touching on, pass offense has not been as strong a point of Appalachian this year. I think this could be a game where you see that get well again. You're looking at one of the worst pass defensive teams in the country, not just the conference, when you look at Georgia State. But I think the flip side of that, too, is that Georgia State team is a year older. They have been a little bit more competitive this year, but still not necessarily progressing along the lines that you would think that a team with the recruiting that's available in that background would be able to. I think that's a huge X factor for Appalachian this week, is that you've got a ton of Georgia guys going back and playing in the Georgia Dome. This is like the baseball player that dreams of playing in Yankee Stadium or in Wrigley Field. For these guys, it's to play in that setting. And that, I think, will give them a shot of adrenaline that will certainly put them over the top.
Definitely.
Certainly no weather issues.
That would be nice.
No, that would be nice.
Even if it is sunny outside, it won't matter. So.
I was dry. I don't know.
Yeah.
What the big deal was until I went to the parking lot.
Exactly. Yeah, of course.
Exactly. All right, so college football had its featured share of upsets around the country. We can get into some of those. The upset that wasn't, though, I guess you could say, or maybe was, depending on how you look at it, was Clemson-Notre Dame. Clemson has been playing for this moment. You could tell they've been playing for this moment. I don't know if that bodes well for them this week against Georgia Tech, but at least in the element against the Fighting Irish, they got out to as hot a start as you could ever imagine a team getting out to, and they were able to use that to their advantage by the time it was all said and done.
I flipped this game off a little early because I thought, Clemson was going to really run away with it, and I did catch the last few plays, but. I think Clemson has a really good chance to make the playoff.
Absolutely.
I mean, I would have thought they would have been favored, at this game at home, even though they are playing Notre Dame. But I thought they showed, that they can win a close game, even if it is kind of close towards the latter half of the game, that they can get that win. They also did that at Louisville. So I think they have all the tools to make a run to the semifinal.
Yeah, being a playoff team for them is going to rest on the play of Deshaun Watson, and he stepped up yet again. I mean, the offense, especially at the start of the game, I mean, it was 14-0. I blinked and it was 14-0, and you were just like, good luck, Notre Dame, good night. You know what I mean? The crowd was fired up. They're going to be a really tough team to beat at home, and if they can close out these games like this on the road, I've said from the start that they have all the talent to be a playoff team. It's just a matter of the fact that a lot of these guys are young. Their defense was kind of a question mark entering the season, and it's turned out to be one of the strongest parts of their entire team, their secondary specifically. And so this team looks ready to go. But Clemson has a tendency year in and year out to drop a game, and especially against Georgia Tech. That's like their kryptonite. And so if they can get through this week and beat Georgia Tech, I mean, I don't know down the stretch. I'm not Florida State, teams like that in the ACC don't scare me as far as for Clemson.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
Where do we see Georgia Tech? Where are they standing right now? They lost the game to UNC. I mean, who isn't a pushover, but I think that's three in a row they've dropped. Yeah. So I'm not sure where that puts that whole side of the conference.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, you look too from Clemson's perspective, talking defense. I thought that if there was going to be a time where the youth of that defense showed up, it was going to be on that 2-point conversion. Here you've held that large lead and let them come back, miss the opportunity to basically ice the game, getting that first down. And here was the chance for a young group to just have it dealt to them right there and see the game get tied. And they were able to persevere. So hats off to them for that. As long as we're taking our hats off to people, I guess you need to do that for Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide, because not only did they head in between the hedges, but they flat rolled Georgia. And everybody thought this was Georgia's coming out party. But I think that played into Nick Saban's personal agenda better than anything possible. You don't respect us. You don't pick us. You think we're done, now we're going to go in and stomp you. And that's exactly what Alabama
Well, we even
did.
said on the show last week that we thought Georgia really kind of, was one of the only teams worth looking at in that conference.
Yeah.
So I was impressed. I think Coker's earning his keep at Bama. I think that he has showed that he can play with the big boys and everything. So, I don't know. Overall, I thought it was a great game.
Yeah, I mean, though I don't think it was as worse for Georgia, at least defensively, as the score might have indicated. You had Alabama scoring a lot of quick strike kind of scores. So certainly, I was surprised to see the score line, and I thought Georgia would be more competitive in this game, and I thought they might win this game. But it's not all down in the dumps right now in Athens.
No, but the thing about Alabama is, and it doesn't matter who it is, I'm sorry, it happened to be Georgia, but Alabama is one of those teams, they play best when their back's against the wall. I always think Saban is the Belichick of college football.
Without the hoodie?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to start talking smack about the team
wear a hoodie in Alabama.
or saying that they're not the team this year. That's exactly when he'll have his guys ready, and it showed, and he showed out in the biggest moment. It just, if you look at the past few years, anytime Alabama loses, it's not like in a game where they're really closely matched. It tends to be these upset type victories where the game just gets away from them. But then they come out down the rest of the season and blow teams out. I will say that, Ohio State surprised a lot of people last year in the playoff. But traditionally, since Saban has been at Alabama, they just don't lose twice in a year.
Yeah, and then what's our thoughts on Ohio State and Indiana?
I was rooting so hard for IU.
I still think JT Barrett should get a real chance and start a few games, but I also think Urban Meyer might be a little stubborn at this point because he's given Cardale Jones the keys to the car, and I think he might want him to slip up, because if he doesn't, then he can say, see, look, Cardale was the man for the job. So
why is Florida State last year, they're in the same position. They're winning games close. They're the number one team, the presumptive favorite, and they can't really dominate anybody. Why is Ohio State not getting the same treatment? Why is everybody saying Urban Meyer, oh, you got it, man. He'll get it figured out, whatever. But Florida State, everybody was like, they don't need to be number one, blah, blah, blah. What's the double standard?
I can't really say definitively what it is, but I will say that Urban Meyer has a little bit more of a track record as far as putting together championship teams.
His post-game interviews are not as funny.
No, they're definitely not. But I think that they get exceptions because Urban Meyer knows the way to build a championship team. And so at this point, we kind of talked about it before, it's just survive. You know what I mean? It sucks, but if you don't have all these huge wins, well, you're still number one. Just don't lose a game, and you're probably not going to fall, barring any sort of, unless somebody within the top three just starts beating everyone by 50, you're not going to lose your spot. And so, they're just figuring out ways to grind out wins for now until they can get it together.
And it's also trendy to dump on the ACC, so I think that had a lot to do with it, possibly.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, from last year with Florida State, and the Big Ten is somewhat more of a respected league in that way. And then also, you look at the bevy of talent that Ohio State has, or we all talk about they have. We think, man, they should be winning by more, but they are winning, and they still have that talent. So we think they'll get it figured out.
Ezekiel Elliott still ran for 200-plus yards.
Yeah.
If you can fall back on that for the time being, that's helpful.
Speaking of talent, the lack thereof at Texas, what is the deal there? How can you have the resource, the money, the players, the resource, and the money
TV network.
get beat like that by a team that used to be your stepbrother? And now all of a sudden TCU might be the dominant team in the state. I think A&M would have something to say about that, but I'd love to see that matchup much more so than what you saw out of TCU Texas this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I flipped this game on, and it was 30-0, and I thought, wow, it must be in the third quarter. I looked down, it's the first quarter. It's the first quarter. Now, it didn't keep on that that pace, which would have been an historic loss for Texas
Yeah.
if that would have kept up. But I'm not sure where this leaves Charlie Strong. I would have thought when kind of the fall and the demise of the Texas program, so to speak, when that all happened, I thought this is a 1-year kind of deal, that they'll get it turned around. This is certainly drawn out much longer than I would have thought. And now you don't want to get too far, you don't get too many years removed, from a good winning season you can fall back on, because memories are short, and particularly with recruits, if you haven't won in the last 2 or 3 years, do they know you've won?
Yeah.
Do they even remember? Do they know who Vince Young is? You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm not
the
exactly
older guy that comes and shows up on the sideline and watches
exactly,
the game.
Yeah. Exactly. But he didn't do anything in the NFL, so who's that guy? So
I think it's kind of sad for Charlie Strong. I mean, I don't know what's leading. I mean, the blowouts are. You can't, there's no excuse for it. But at the same time, it's going to take a little bit of time if he can get it, if he can survive long enough to get his recruiting pipeline going and getting the players that fit for him. I expected to see more of what Harbaugh is doing with Michigan right now at Texas.
Yes.
I think it's a huge surprise, and especially it's sad to lose to a game like that. I mean,
Can't have players tweeting in the locker room at halftime.
No.
That was probably the most disappointing thing to come out of that game, bar none.
Yeah, it's a loss of organizational control.
Well, let's go to the NFL here. Carolina Panthers 4-0. They're amongst a group that's at 4-0, and I don't know if they look like the sore thumb at this point in time or they look like they belong. But this is not necessarily the group of teams at the beginning of the season that you would have thought would have gone perfect through the first quarter of the year. But there are the Carolina Panthers, and they did so in one of their more dominating wins of the season.
I'm not overly excited that the Panthers are 4-0. I mean, I'm certainly glad they are. I think they took care of business in the way they should have through these first 4 games, because looking at the talent on the Panthers roster, looking at the talent on the other sideline through these first 4 games, I think they should win all 4 of those games. Yeah. So I'm going to somewhat, withhold judgment on what I really think this team is about. Maybe in a few weeks from now, after we've played the Seahawks and a few other teams.
Exactly.
But we've already mentioned Josh Norman once. Certainly, that guy's having an awesome beginning to his season, and hopefully Luke Kuechly can get back for that game against Seattle.
Yeah, Josh Norman's about to cost the Panthers a lot of money. Teams tend to push off contracts a little too long, and Norman is making them pay. But I think the Panthers, like you said, in a couple weeks we'll be able to see what type of team they actually are. I think in the first couple games, I think Houston's probably the best team they played, and they look terrible. I mean, they just don't have consistency on offense. And you play the Saints without Drew Brees. When you play the Saints with Drew Brees and win, no matter how poorly the Saints have played overall, they got a big win last night, but overall they haven't played well this year. But when they beat them, that's when I'll believe in this team. Or if they go and beat Atlanta in Atlanta, I don't know exactly what to expect from Atlanta either, but they're playing pretty well, and they're dominating teams that they're playing. So I think those are the true tests, and if they come out with that, then I can believe.
I will say though, for me, kind of the icing on the cake last night or yesterday was Ryan Dallaire coming out, being the rookie, kind of showing that everyone was kind of expecting Jared Allen to be the guy who gave him what they'd been waiting for, and all of a sudden you've got this kid who was originally an undrafted free agent from the Buccaneers, ended up going to Washington for a hot second, and then appeared on the Panthers, and suddenly 2 sacks or 3 sacks if you count the one that the Winston penalty scrubbed. But he had a great game, and I think that no one was expecting it, and I'm hoping that it wasn't just kind of a, sorry you got rid of me, here, take it. I hope it's something that's actually going to continue, because, he could be a really, really big player.
You hope he can keep it up once teams get some film on him.
Exactly.
Because right now he's certainly not drawing a double team. And that guy on the other side of the line definitely is. We'll see. But certainly a bright spot, after you lose Charles Johnson, Frank Alexander, before the season even started. Some guys like that, you need someone to step up, and so far he's done that.
All right, before we get to Monday night picks, we're going to give you 30 seconds to rail on the Bills.
Oh no.
I don't know. I'm a little afraid to. I don't know.
I will if you don't. So
Yeah,
they're the most
I'm ashamed
undisciplined
of my
team.
Colts more for anything, so I'm afraid to rail on other teams when I feel like I really should just be railing on them. So please,
Yeah,
you take it.
the only record that the Bills are going to break this year is going to be the penalty record if
Yes.
the things keep playing out. The fact that we have like 200 yards in penalties every game and are still in most games is impressive. So when you cut that out, that's when you get blowout. I mean, yeah, we blew out the Dolphins and they're not that great, but notice the penalty numbers
Got their
were
coach
low.
fired.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. But the penalty numbers were low and we dominated. But every game that has been close, and especially the games we've lost, comes down to penalties.
I was setting you up to take him down. And
I know,
you just-
I
It's all right. I did it myself.
All
It's
right,
fine.
Monday night picks real quick. Let's look at the leaderboard. And you guys caught up a little bit. I'm
bit.
impressed. All right, so what do you got here? We got Seattle and Detroit tonight. What are your picks?
I got Seattle. I mean, Detroit is winless so far, and I'm not exactly sure, where that team is going. I think the loss of Ndamukong Suh was a bigger deal than. Well, certainly he was a big loss, but I think it's hurting them more than I would have thought it would have. And I think Russell Wilson, Jimmy Graham, those guys, even though Marshawn Lynch is not going to play, will be more than enough.
Yeah.
I'm going with Seattle as well. I think to go along with the Ndamukong Suh loss, they also lost Nick Fairley, which was the complement there in the middle, and those two created the pass rush for that team. I mean, they have Ezekiel Ansah, he's been all right. I mean, he's a second-year player now, and he's been all right. But if you're Detroit, what's your weapon? Calvin Johnson.
Yeah.
Who are you going against? Seattle's secondary. I mean, that doesn't sound good for them. So
Yeah.
Seattle.
No, I've got Seattle as well. I mean, even though Thomas Rawls being in the place of Marshawn Lynch is a little bit concerning, I think that he's going to do a good job. And I mean, Russell Wilson's 27-2 at home. It's hard to pick against that. But you're going to.
In the spirit of punters who lateral, all right? I'm going with Detroit because of Sam Martin, the Appalachian State
there you go.
hometown
Okay, I can
kicker.
respect
So we'll
that.
see
That's good.
if I can extend on my 2-score lead on you guys. That'll do it for this edition of Sports Bar. It's last call here. As always, we invite you to send us your comments at watchapptv.com. For the crew, I'm David Jackson. We'll see you next week.